What if I told you there's a place so cursed, so steeped in suffering and malevolent energy, that the government of its country forbids anyone from setting foot on it? A place where the soil itself is said to be composed of 50% human ash, the final resting place for over 160,000 souls who died in agony. This isn't a location you can buy a ticket for, a tourist trap you can visit on a whim. It is an island of pure, concentrated despair, a stain on the shimmering waters of the Venetian lagoon that locals won't even speak its name aloud after dark. They call it simply the island. But its true name is Poveglia, and it is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most haunted place on Earth. Forget the castles with their lonely gray ladies. Forget the asylums with their echoing hallways. This is a different kind of horror entirely. This is a place where the very ground you would walk on is a graveyard, where the air you would breathe is venomous with the memory of plague, madness, and murder. The story of Poveglia isn't just a ghost story. It's a chronicle of hell on Earth, a narrative written in blood and tears, and its chilling legacy continues to seep into our world from its isolated shores. To understand why Poveglia holds this dark crown, we have to travel back to the time when the Black Death was a phantom, riding the winds of Europe, a specter of death that knocked on every door. It was during the 14th century that the island first earned its infernal reputation. As the bubonic plague tore through the continent, Venice, a major hub of trade, found itself on the front lines of the pandemic. Panic gripped the city, with them inside, a desperate and futile attempt to contain the unstoppable. And for those who showed the slightest sign of the pestilence, for those who were merely suspected of harboring the sickness, there was only one destination: Poveglia. It was transformed into a lazaretto, a quarantine station, but it was far from a hospital. Boats, their hulls black with grief, would arrive at the island's docks, not with merchants or travelers, but with the dying and the dead. Men, women, and children, coughing their lungs into blood-stained rags, their bodies racked with fever, would be dragged ashore and left to fend for themselves in makeshift, squalid encampments. There were no doctors, no comfort, no last rites. There was only the sound of 100 hacking coughs, the fevered whispers of the delirious, and the constant, oppressive silence of the lagoon that seemed to swallow all hope. When death finally came, as it always did, it was not a gentle release. The bodies were not given proper burials. They were unceremoniously hurled into great, burning pits, or stacked like cordwood in mass graves. Layer upon layer of human misery. Terror, their rage seeping deep into the earth. It is said that over 160,000 people were disposed of on the island during this time. Their ashes and bones mingling with the dirt until the very ground became a sepulchre. This is the foundation of the haunting, the original sin of the island, a monument to despair, and its dark reputation was only just beginning. Centuries passed. The memory of the plague pits faded into local legend, but the sense of dread that clung to Poveglia never left. It was an island that had known only death, and so, in a twisted stroke of irony, in 1922, it was chosen as the site for a new kind of hell, a mental asylum. The logic was as flawed as it was cruel. What better place to house those deemed insane than an island already infamous for its madness and sorrow? But this was not a place of healing. It was a place of experimentation, of torture, of unimaginable cruelty. All presided over by a doctor, whose name has been scrubbed from the records, but whose legacy of horror remains the most terrifying part of Poveglia's legend. This doctor, a man who was supposed to bring solace to the troubled minds in his care, instead saw them as little more than lab rats. He was obsessed with the idea that insanity could be cured through crude, brutal procedures. He would perform lobotomies with ice picks and hammers, not with anesthesia, but with the patient fully awake, their screams muffled by the thick stone walls of the hospital. He would conduct twisted experiments, pushing the human body and mind to their absolute breaking point, all in the name of a science that was nothing more than sadism. The patients, already tortured by their own demons, were now subjected to a living nightmare. Their days were filled with the scrape of steel instruments, the cold, clinical detachment of a monster in a white coat, and the chilling knowledge that no one was coming to save them. The island, already saturated with the grief of the plague victims, now became a sponge for a new kind of suffering. The terror of the living. The air grew thick with a new kind of psychic energy, a palpable sense of dread and hopelessness that was almost a physical presence. It is said that the doctor himself began to change. To hear the voices of his victims, the tormented souls of the plague pits, and the fresh ghosts of the patients he had brutalized. They called to him from the walls, from the floor, from the very soil beneath his feet. The legend says that the madness he tried to cure in others finally consumed him. In a final, grand act of delirium, he climbed to the top of the island's bell tower, the one that had stood as a silent witness to centuries of sorrow, and threw himself from the precipice, plummeting to the ground below. Some say he died instantly. Others, in a more chilling version of the tale, say he survived the fall, only to be choked to death by a spectral, misty entity that rose from the plague pit soil below. The asylum was closed shortly after, its dark secrets sealed within its decaying walls.